All right, we're here. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. Thank you so much for joining us on a Friday. That's today, right? Today's a Friday. Welcome to Friday. It's a good day. It's the end of the week. Josh Doring is here with me. It's an NFL jam-packed show. Of course, with the championship games this weekend in the AFC and the NFC. We got other things to talk about around I was going to say the association. That's not that's the NBA, around the league. But thank you so much thank you so much for being here with us. Josh, how you doing this morning?
I'm fired up and ready to go.
Clearly, this is one of my favorite things about you, and there are just things that you get really hyped up about and you're really excited to talk about. And I'm not sure coaching changes in particular is on there, but coaching changes is certainly in that category. And coaching changes is, I think there aren't very many things that rub you the wrong way, like coaching changes that don't make sense to you or coaching changes that make you itch your head. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say about what's been going on in the NFL, in the coaching carousel world, as well as your thoughts on which of these four quarterbacks are going to go on to Super Bowl Sunday. It's funny, before the season started, I picked the Chiefs and Bucks to be in the Super Bowl, and you know, the last few days people have asked me, who do I think is going to win this weekend, and I won't say who I think is going to win, but I keep saying, you know, the Chiefs and the Bucks, I picked them before the whole season started, so I'd kind of like to be right about that. But we'll get to that here in the next segment. We got some NFL news and notes to go through. Let's just, where would you like to start? Would you like to start with your beloved Eagles or your hometown team and Dan Campbell? You pick.
I want to start somewhere else entirely, if that's okay.
Please be my guest.
Because I want to start with the Eric Bieniemy angle of this.
Sure.
Because obviously he's getting a lot of attention as, in a vacuum, the guy you would think would be able to have his choice of jobs as the offensive coordinator of the best team in the NFL, the best offense in the NFL. Patrick Mahomes is offensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That guy always gets multiple job offers, puts himself in a great position come the coaching carousel. It's just how this works. Mm-hmm. That's the place you look to go find your next assistant coach that's going to get their first head coaching shot, right?
Sure.
And of course, Bieniemy gets interviewed for all these jobs. He still doesn't have one. The only job left is the Texans. And at this point, I really hope, even if they offer it to him, he just says no, because he deserves better than that.
Sure.
But the part of and then obviously the other factor here is the race component. And this is the part that I don't get. Right, so there have been some speculation, and there was a report specifically with the Falcons interview that Bieniemy isn't interviewing well, and there's certainly this, I don't even know what word to use, but argument that, or at least being open-minded enough to acknowledge there might be a reason nobody has hired him as their head coach yet, outside of just the fact that he's a person of color. That there might be a specific, whether it's his interview or concerns about his vision or whatever it might be, there could be a reason that it's not fair to just immediately jump to he doesn't have a head coaching job because he's black. But this is the part of it I don't get. If there was a legitimate concern, and I tweeted this yesterday after the Eagles made their hire, you would think that would be widely reported by now, right?
Sure.
The logic being, if you're an owner who is finding a reason not to hire him, because that's the point we're at, like I said, he is the logical hire for any team looking for an offensive mind. He's Patrick Mahomes' offensive coordinator and the offensive coordinator, the defending Super Bowl champions. So if you're going to look for a reason not to hire him, and again, there might be one, you would think with the amount of criticism that's coming the owner's ways, somebody would have said something other than this report coming out of Atlanta that other people disputed right away. He reportedly interviewed really well with the Texans. There's just no, I haven't seen anything widespread, and I might be missing something, but I did some research this morning just to make sure as to a reason why all these teams aren't hiring him. And let's also just stop with the he hasn't called plays nonsense, because Nick Sirianni has never called plays either, and he's the head coach of the Eagles now. It's just incredibly frustrating and disappointing to see after the summer of George Floyd and the NFL's, it takes all of us. Well, guess what? The owners are part of us too. And so we sit here and Eric Bieniemy is either not going to get a head coaching job or not get one that he deserves and put himself in a terrible spot from day one because he's coaching the Houston Texans.
I'll give you two reasons why I think are playing into why he's not getting a head coaching job. The first one is he's coaching for Andy Reid. And when was the last time you heard anybody give props to a play the Chiefs ran? When was the last time you heard them give the props to Eric Bieniemy? Because I mean, it's very likely that Bieniemy called the 4th and 1 play. At least there's a shot, and there's a
or was involved in some way.
But Andy Reid gets all the credit for that,
right? And he's the play caller. My counter.
So what? Well, then what's your counter there? If the offensive coordinator isn't calling the plays, then what's his chops for being a head coach?
Sure. Well, here's
I'm playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah. Oh,
just to be clear.
No. My counter is pretty simple. One, that logic has never stuck for anybody who's white.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
It's the same story
Absolutely.
in Indianapolis. Frank Reich's calling plays. Nick Sirianni's not running that offense. That's
Sure.
Frank Reich.
Sure.
He's in the exact same position Bieniemy's, and it's happened time and time again. I'm just pointing to Sirianni, but there are guys that get hired who are white all the time that have no actual play calling experience or weren't doing it in their job where they were an offensive coordinator. And two, look at the past couple offensive coordinators that Andy Reid has had. Matt Nagy, Doug Peterson. Teams were willing to give them a shot. Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl. There's an inconsistency in the logic where people point to this stuff now, but nobody was talking about it when it was the other guys who Andy Reid has taken under his wing and was helping him play in the offense and all of that stuff. That's my counter.
And here's why he's not getting hired, apart from clearly and unfortunately, and why can't we get past this, the color of his skin seems to have some sort of impact. I think the biggest reason, though, is because he's old.
Mm-hmm.
He's 51 years old, which when you compare him to Andy Reid or compare him to Belichick, is not that old. But look who's getting hired in the NFL right now.
Yep.
I think that has to be taken into consideration.
Sure.
Because what Sean McVay did after being hired by the Rams has completely changed the way that NFL franchises hire head coaches.
Absolutely.
They're all young. I don't have a list right in front of me, but Dan Campbell, 44. The guy who just got, Sirianni, 39.
Yep.
The guy who just got hired by the Chargers, also under the age of 40, I'm pretty sure.
As is Arthur Smith in Atlanta. Yep, all three of them are under 40. Mm-hmm.
So that would be people are chasing the Sean McDermott. People are chasing the Sean McVay, and people aren't chasing the Andy Reid. And they're not chasing the Bill Belichick. They're chasing the guys that they're hoping will be Sean McVay now, and in 30 years be Bill Belichick. I guess they're searching for the end result of Bill Belichick. They're searching for the coach that can go and be their coach for 20 years if it falls right. And no coach ever is going to be the coach for
Right.
anywhere in 20 years. It's the same reason why no superstar is ever going to play for the same team in the NBA again. It's just not the way it works anymore. But I think that is the right. I think if you're making a Venn diagram of this situation, that the color of Bieniemy's skin is a part of the equation, unfortunately. But I also think a big piece of the pie is the fact that he's a decade, 7 years to a decade older, if not older in some cases, than the guys that are getting head coaching jobs this year. Which is fair or not, deserves that or not. I think that's a part of this as well. That right is not the, like I said, it's not the only part of the conversation, and the other parts of the conversation aren't what they should be when trying to hire a head football coach. But I think it's a big part of it as well. The trend is going against Bieniemy. It's the same,
Sure.
just like the trend in the NBA for centers who can't shoot threes are effectively useless now, right? Like DeAndre Jordan is much less useful than he was in Lob City for a reason, because he could be on the floor in Lob City with Blake Griffin, and the two could never play on the floor in the NBA right now together. Of course, there's that part of the conversation that isn't there with centers is here with Bieniemy, and that's the issue. But I think that age and the trend that we're seeing with head coaches is also working in against Bieniemy in this specific situation. Of course, then the Texans are, so then a 54-year-old will get hired, and my argument will be effectively void, and I'll have to swallow my words. But right now, based on who's been hired, it's all young guys.
Yeah, and no, it's completely valid. It's definitely part of the conversation when you're looking at some of these guys. And when I'm looking at the coaching carousel as a whole and sort of the top options available here, of course, Bieniemy comes to mind. And to a certain extent,
Well, I guess Urban Meyer got hired. Urban Meyer is not, but Urban Meyer, I think we would both agree, is of a different circumstance.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've been impressed with Arthur Smith in Tennessee. I thought he did a really good job. And you're absolutely right. Looking for the next McVay, and you look at these guys who were hired. It's Arthur Smith, it's Nick Sirianni, and it's Brandon Staley. Two of those guys were quality control, meaning they're the guys who got the opportunities because of who they know. And Arthur Smith in particular, and again, I'm impressed with him. I think there's an argument he deserves to be a head coach now. He certainly deserves a shot at some point based on what he's done. His dad is also the CEO of FedEx, or owner of FedEx. That is something that needs to be thrown out there. But the point being, those quality control jobs go to
Fred Smith, the guy.
Right. Those quality control jobs go to the guys who know somebody, who get an opportunity. Those kind of opportunities that Eric Bieniemy and people of color typically don't get. Again, and I'm not saying these guys can't succeed either, but you can be unqualified and still have success in the job. We don't know what these guys are going to look like. And of course, Brandon Staley got the Sean McVay
treatment,
magic sprinkle dust on him.
Oh yeah, that too.
So, and again, Chris talked about it, how impressive and some of the good things you've heard about him. So I'm not saying all these guys don't deserve a shot, but the other part of this for me is, okay, if you're the Eagles in particular, because they made their hire last, it's the newest one, and it's the one that I have the most questions about. You lost Staley, you lost Arthur Smith. I thought Arthur Smith would have been a really interesting possibility there because of the Carson Wentz factor and the fact that
you're talking about Philly? Are you talking about Philly right now?
Yeah,
okay, sorry, my bad.
One of the first names that came to mind for me was Arthur Smith. But because you fired Doug Peterson late, you're behind the 8 ball. Other teams want those two guys. They were both going to get head coaching jobs. Fair or not, it was going to happen.
Sure.
So you lose out on them. Those are the two guys you're probably looking at as most likely to be what you want. The Sean McVay, Sean McDermott, Kevin Stefanski, Brian Flores, young, exciting coach that's getting you results right away.
Sure.
So at that point, why are you going to option 5 in the list of guys who might end up being this young, exciting offensive mind that everybody's looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Because not all these guys are going to work.
Sure.
You have to be either so confident that Nick Sirianni is something special,
Which everyone is
or
convinced he's not, at least
right,
not yet.
right, or, and what I think is the most likely option is they just kind of looked at it and said, well, we can put this guy in here and he's not going to have a lot of leverage and he's not going to want a lot of control because he's a first-time head coach who's quite frankly lucky to be there.
Yeah.
Because you saw my reaction. You saw my reaction when it was announced that they had interviewed him, and I was confused because I didn't even know who he was.
Yeah.
I didn't know that people thought the Colts offensive coordinator was deserving of head coaching consideration.
I thought Eberflus was the only guy.
Right.
Yeah.
But he's not even the most highly rated coordinator on his own team.
Right.
At this point. And you were the one that told me that they hired him.
Yeah.
And you saw my reaction there. It just doesn't. So I think what it came down to, and I saw Emmanuel Acho, who played for the Eagles, talking about this, is you hire this dude, it gives you control. That's why Doug Peterson's not there. Doug Peterson didn't want them telling him to fire coaches.
Yeah.
You can't. Nick Sirianni doesn't have that kind of leverage.
No.
So that part of it works from an organizational standpoint, from a Howie Roseman standpoint.
Sure.
But that's really where it's not that Arthur Smith and Brandon Staley have jobs as much as it is at some point the odds are just working against you that you're going to find the special guy if you're fourth on the totem pole because you started your coaching hiring process late.
Right.
So at that point, you have a broken quarterback who you're pretty much tied to. Why not go with the guy that's endorsed by Patrick Mahomes?
Yeah.
Like I don't get that. But you're absolutely right that this is part of the other factor working here is that everybody is going to go hire this young guy, even though most of them probably aren't going to work out all that well.
Right.
Because one or two of them probably will, at least for a while, and all of a sudden it looks like a really good hire. And to the Lions in particular, because they're sort of a unique case in this for me, that I'm usually not big about winning the press conference. I just don't care.
Mm-hmm.
But for that organization to come off of Matt Patricia and to just be so, have a fan base that's just so frustrated right now, to have Dan Campbell come in and be Dan Campbell, because I think it sort of gets forgotten the kind of positive vibes he created when he came in to take over that Dolphins mess on an interim basis after the Richie Incognito, Jonathan Martin thing.
Right.
I believe that's when he was there. This is who he is. He's going to win the press conference. He's going to get your fan base excited. He's a high energy, high intensity dude. And for the Lions in particular, I think there was value in getting a guy you knew was going to do what Dan Campbell did in that press conference, and that's get your fan base excited.
Sure.
And say the right things and talk about inheriting the city's identity and all of that stuff.
Sure.
Most of the time I don't care about that, but I think that's a case where if you're choosing between options you feel like are pretty similar, taking the charismatic dude that's easy to like and is going to get people energized, even if it still means you're going to be a 7-9 football team, there's some value in that at this point.
Sure.
Right. So that one I kind of get too. It's just, I just have a hard time believing that with as many openings as there are, all these guys are better options than Eric Bieniemy. And I know you don't actually disagree with me on that.
No,
and
I do not.
There's just a fault in that logic, I guess is the best way I would put this to sort of answer your not a question, but your point about the young guys. I just see a flaw in that logic when you're picking the fifth one, as opposed to, yeah, we could take the guy who's proven, had success with Patrick Mahomes, is well respected within the organization, who will probably do a good job, but isn't exactly a needle mover, versus we can get the Sean McVay magic sprinkle dust dude, or we can get the guy who turned the Titans into an offensive juggernaut with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback at the age of 36 or whatever Arthur Smith is,
Mm-hmm.
with the idea that this guy might actually be the special one.
Right.
That I can buy into. Where I have a much harder time is when you are late to the party and you're still just going to get the offensive mind that you hope works out that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't calling plays and wasn't overseeing a elite offense either.
Sure.
I mean, his defense, the Colts defense is better than their offense. I think you'd agree.
Oh, absolutely. That's why they went to the playoffs this year. Yeah.
Right. So that, and look, Sirianni deserves some credit for having to work with different quarterbacks every year and kind of rebuild that offense every year, or at least help Frank Reich do it. He's involved in their offensive plan.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, the Eagles' process was just a very clear example of everything that is so flawed.
Sure.
Because instead of hiring Eric Bieniemy, they were going between Josh McDaniels and the guy who was the mentee of the guy whose mentor you just fired.
Yeah.
It just, other jobs, if you get it first and you say we want Arthur Smith over Eric Bieniemy, okay, I can buy into that to a degree. But we got to the end of this carousel and the Eagles were the second to last team to bite, and it just, there was a lot of symbolism and irony in how that all played out for me.
I can't. I can't disagree with anything that you've said, and it's not like you said. Sure, there are at the top of the carousel, so to speak, that there are decisions that you can make that you decide that Arthur Smith is your guy over Eric Bieniemy, but you get to the bottom of the list, to the middle of the list, and it's just not clear what the logical pros and cons list is that gets you Nick Sirianni as the better guy than Mike Bieniemy. Nobody except, nobody outside of the Eagles war room apparently seems to be able to see a path to which they put Nick Sirianni and Mike Bieniemy side by side. Eric, sorry, what was I saying? Mike, sorry. There are lots of sorry. Eric Bieniemy, excuse me. Side by side, and ultimately coming out with Sirianni is the better guy. I think, right. I think the fact that he's 12 years younger is a big part of this, and not the only part of this, and that's why we're having this conversation. But the trend is in the complete opposite direction of Bieniemy.
Yep.
Because he's also been he's been a coordinator, and he's also not been in the NFL. Like McVay was in the NFL just as long before he got the Rams head coaching job as Bieniemy is. Bieniemy didn't get to the NFL until 2013. Excuse me, that's a lie. He was with the Vikings as a running backs coach, but then bounced back to Colorado. He was at Colorado for 2 different stints, and then he hasn't been anything more than a running backs coach at the NFL level until 2018. So I think his age also, but his age doesn't give you the NFL experience that you would assume that he has. It's not like he has 10 years more of an NFL experience as opposed to some of these other guys. When you put them side by side, he has 11 years of NFL experience between his first stint with the Vikings from 2006 to 2010 and then 2013 to the present. So that's roughly 11, 12 years. I'm just, looking and trying to find other reasons why. Because on the surface, you're right. He's the offensive coordinator and of the best team in football the last 2 years. That guy is supposed to get head coaching looks. That's just how it's always worked, and it's how it works everywhere, right? in the college football world. Nick Saban's guys and coordinators,
Right.
they get offered jobs every single offseason.
Look at Steve Sarkisian.
Yeah. And then you go to, I mean, you can find Mike Krzyzewski's assistant coaches all over the country, whether it's, or players all over the country, whether it's Bobby Hurley or Jeff Capel or Wojo, whoever it is. And the same can be said in the NFL. And I think, and if what's going to happen with Sean McVay, that he has the magic sprinkle dust. If Sean McVay is first, you know who should be second right now in the magic sprinkle dust? Andy Reid. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the other part of this too, is that it's sprinkle dust is like the best thing you can have on your resume right now. And Andy Reid has the second most valuable sprinkle dust right now. At least in my fun fantasy world where there's sprinkle dust. Magic sprinkle dust, of course. I can make sprinkle dust right now, get some sprinkles, throw them in a processor, and you got sprinkle dust. Sorry. But yeah, it's head scratching, and it's just impossible that, at least on the surface, is impossible that there were seven different head coaching positions up for grabs, and that the offensive coordinator and a guy that everybody vouches for, that he doesn't get one of these jobs, or at the very least he's stuck with the job that literally nobody on the planet wants right now, and that's the Houston Texans head coaching job.
The Texans job is the job where I could see somebody like Sirianni getting it as we convinced this guy to take our head coaching job because he wanted the head coaching job and knew this is the only one he was going to get. Mm-hmm. Kind of what happened to Brian Flores in Miami. And then all of a sudden, Brian Flores made them a really good team. Mm-hmm. But obviously, the issues in Houston go much deeper than the actual players in the roster.
Right.
And the other counter, I guess, I have to the thought process of just hiring the exciting young dude or a young dude with the idea that maybe he's there long term is exactly what you said before. Since when do head coaches stick around for 5 years, let alone 10, 15, 20? Doug Peterson just won a Super Bowl and he's done. Aside from Belichick and Pete Carroll and Andy Reid, but even, the Eagles fired Andy Reid. It's not like he's been in the same spot the entire time. Now, it was just kind of one of those things, I think, but where it was time to just go separate.
It's a little bit like Tom Crean getting fired from Indiana. He didn't actually do anything to get fired. It was just time to make a change.
Right. But even that in and of itself, sometimes it's just time to go a different direction.
There's plenty of logic to argue against it, but the argument for it is, look who John McVay is. And it's hard to and look who Sean McDermott is, and it's hard to get past that, as well as easy as it might seem to come to the conclusion that you just came to. It's also just as hard to get the little guy on your shoulder telling you that, dude, that might be the next Sean McVay.
Right. That we could have the guy. Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. But the other point of this is that I don't think anybody thinks that Nick Sirianni is the guy, right? But he still got that job.
So we'll see. It's just, we're in the same spot with the NFL and also I saw Bomani Jones make this point.
Wait, no, we're not. They wrote end of racism on the back end line. Come on, dude.
Right.
They fixed it. Okay.
Right. It's also telling that
anybody listening on podcast, I'm rolling my eyes right now, by the way.
Anybody of the high profile candidates in this cycle, it's also telling that Bieniemy was, well, I guess, and Saleh and new with the Jets also applies to this, but those were really the only two guys you were talking about in terms of your high profile candidates as people of color.
Sure.
Now, we also had the news out of Washington today. They have pretty much top to bottom now, from president to GM to coach, minorities. and I believe it's the first time that the president and GM have both been people of color. So you've got that going. Washington's clearly embracing some diversity,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's because they really think Martin Mayhew's the best guy for the job or because they're trying to get a qualified football guy and also help their image with everything that's going on. I don't know. I'm not here to speculate, but we're just in the same place we always are with GMs and coaches, and it's just Bieniemy is a fascinating situation for me because of all the reasons we talked about. That
Mm-hmm.
you have to find a reason not to hire him because he is, in theory, he's the guy,
Mm-hmm.
and so the and again, yeah, people like pointing to this. He doesn't call plays, which is just nonsense because people
Sure.
get head coaching jobs with. I believe Andy Reid also didn't call plays before the Eagles hired him. We're talking about Andy Reid as the best play call in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter all that much, especially when you're inconsistent about it.
Sure.
But so I think the one thing you can point to outside of the obvious elephant in the room is what you said about he is not Sean McVay. He cannot be Sean McVay. It's just, are you willing to take the high risk, sort of low ceiling, or high ceiling, low floor guy?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you going to take the guy who's more qualified, can theoretically step in right away and make you better, but also isn't seen as a magical wizard with magic sprinkle dust?
Sure.
The way Sean McVay and Kevin Stefanski to a certain degree, or Sean McDermott or somebody, where you're not, I mean, they're as safe as you can be in the NFL outside of Bill Belichick at this point, pretty much because of what they've accomplished.
Right.
So I find these conversations fascinating. I think they're important. And real quick on Dwayne Haskins too, before we get out of our news and notes segment here.
Mm-hmm.
All I really have to say is he was going to get a second chance somewhere. I feel like Pittsburgh's the perfect place. That if it can't work there, then you've got real questions about his ability to be a NFL player for an extended period of time. That with Mike Tomlin, that organization, that culture, it's kind of like Antonio Brown in New England, where if the Patriots are releasing you and can't make it work, it tells you something. So,
well, clearly, I think it just told us that Belichick didn't want to deal with the headache because he's actually been a respectable wide receiver again in Tampa Bay.
Right, and that's the other interesting part of it. Yeah, I thought about that. That was the first thing that came to my mind as well. He had all of these teams that didn't want him, and then all of a sudden the Buccaneers took a chance, and so far it's worked out well. So yeah, you got to give him credit on that. I'm okay with Haskins getting a second chance, and I think this is a good spot. Is really all I'm saying.
Sure, I'd like to see the Steelers come up with a run game for him so that he's not asked to make all the plays when he's just hasn't proven he's capable of making many plays in the NFL. That's it's sort of the if I was a dad test. If I was a dad and I wanted my son to play for a specific football team, the Steelers would be pretty high on that list with Mike Tomlin and that organization. So from that perspective, I like it. From the on-field resources and what the position the Steelers are in right now, I'm not as big of a fan of it. But there's an argument that for a young guy who's looking to get his confidence back and still trying to find his footing in the NFL to a large degree, having a place that passes the if I was a dad test is probably more important than the place that fits this is the situation from an on-field and talent and they have great receivers, Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster. They have guy, and James Conner once upon a time was a problem in the backfield, right? Not all that long ago. So it's not like the foundation isn't there. The fit the dream situation for a guy like Haskins on the field is a little different, but in terms of organization for a young guy like that, there aren't many places better for him to go.
And it could look different by the time, if he ever is the starting quarterback, that he takes the reins, because let's say Ben Roethlisberger comes back for another year. Maybe then they draft a running back in the second round when it's a valid point. I also part of me wants Haskins to not play this season and
Sure.
to just regroup a
See
little
that
bit.
for sure. Yeah.
And then, but so that's where also I like this fit that you've got assuming Ben comes back, you have a short-term answer at quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have a year in that organization, get familiar with him, and see, do we want to give this guy a shot to be Big Ben's successor whenever that day comes?
Sure.
But right, if you're throwing Haskins out there next season to play
Oof.
the way Big Ben is,
I'm a little
that's
worried about
asking
that.
for trouble.
Yeah. All right. Let's take a break. We'll come back, do predictions for championship weekend. NFC, AFC, Bills, Chiefs, Packers, Bucks. Got 4 pretty good quarterbacks in the conference championships this year. We'll talk about that next. You're watching 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network.